The new queen's first test, the morning sun streamed through the tall windows of Buckingham Palace as Queen Camilla walked through the grand corridors for the first time as the reigning monarch. Everything felt different now. The same halls she had walked as a duchess, then as a queen consort, now belonged to her in a way they never had before. The weight of the crown was not just on her head, but in every step she took. Palace staff bowed as she passed, their faces showing the proper respect. But she could sense something else in their eyes. Uncertainty? Question marks? After all, she was not the queen they had expected to serve when they first began their careers in the royal household. Many of them had served Queen Elizabeth for decades, and the transition to King Charles had been smooth because everyone knew it would happen someday. But Camilla's path to this moment had been different, more complicated. And everyone knew it as she approached the main entrance hall. She noticed a young guard standing at attention near the grand staircase. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with the crisp red uniform of the Queen's Guard perfectly pressed and every button gleaming. His black bearskin hat sat perfectly straight, and his rifle was held at exactly the right angle. Everything about his appearance was flawless, following centuries of tradition, but something in his posture caught her attention. While he stood at attention as required, there was a stiffness to his stance that seemed to go beyond mere military discipline. His jaw was set in a way that suggested tension, and though his eyes looked straight ahead as trained, she could sense a certain resistance in his bearing. Queen Camilla had learned to read people during her many years in the public eye. She had faced criticism, doubt, and resistance before, and she had developed an instinct for sensing when someone was struggling with her authority. This young guard was clearly one of those people. She slowed her pace, pretending to examine a painting on the wall, while actually observing the guard more closely. He couldn't have been more than 25 years old. He's probably fresh from military training and full of ideas about honor, duty, and tradition. To him, she might represent a departure from everything he had been taught to respect about the monarchy. The palace had been buzzing with whispers since the succession. Not everyone was comfortable with the changes, and Camilla knew that winning over the staff would be just as important as winning over the public. The guard represented something larger than himself. He was a symbol of the institution's resistance to change. The old guard clinging to old ways as she continued to observe him. She noticed small details that confirmed her suspicions. His breathing was slightly irregular, as if he was fighting some internal battle. His grip on his rifle was perhaps a bit too tight. Most telling of all, when a senior palace official walked by and nodded respectfully toward where the queen stood, the young guard's eyes flickered, almost imperceptibly in her direction. Before snapping back to attention, Queen Camilla made a decision. This moment, right here in the entrance hall, would be her first real test as the monarch. Not a ceremonial duty or a public appearance, but a genuine challenge to her authority from within her own household. How she handled this situation would set the tone for everything that followed. She approached the guard directly, her heels clicking softly on the marble floor. Other staff members who were nearby sensed something significant was about to happen and subtly positioned themselves, where they could observe while maintaining their duties. Word would spread quickly through the palace about whatever transpired next. The young guard's breathing became even more controlled as the queen approached. He knew she was coming toward him, but protocol demanded that he not acknowledge her presence until directly addressed. His military training was warring with whatever personal feelings he harbored about the monarchy's new leadership. Queen Camilla stopped directly in front of him, close enough that he could smell her subtle perfume, close enough that the interaction would be unmistakably personal rather than ceremonial. She studied his face, noting the strong jawline, the clear blue eyes that stared determinedly ahead, the slight tremor in his left eyelid that betrayed his inner turmoil. "Guard," she said quietly, her voice carrying the authority of centuries of royal tradition, but also something else, a personal challenge that cut through the formal atmosphere of the palace like a knife through silk. The young man's entire body tensed even further, if that was possible. This was it. This was the moment that would define not just his career, potentially the new queen's relationship with the very people sworn to protect her. The silence in the great hall was deafening, broken only by the distant sound of footsteps from other parts of the palace and the barely audible ticking of the ancient grandfather clock. Near the main doors, what happened next would be talked about in the palace for years to come. The command that shocked everyone, Queen Camilla's voice cut through the silence like a blade. "I want you to kneel," she said, her words echoing in the vast marble hall. The command was simple, direct, and completely unprecedented. The young guard's eyes widened almost imperceptibly. In all his training, in all the protocols he had memorized, in all the scenarios he had been prepared for, this had never been covered. Guards stood at attention for royalty. They saluted. They followed specific ceremonial procedures that had been refined over hundreds of years. But kneeling, that was not part of any military protocol he knew. Around the hall, a few staff members who were present froze in their activities. A housemaid stopped dusting a priceless vase. A palace official paused mid-stride on his way to an important meeting. A footman carrying silver tea service slowed his pace to almost nothing. Everyone sensed that they were witnessing something extraordinary, something that would become palace legend. The guard's mind raced. Was this some kind of test? Was the queen trying to humiliate him? Was she asserting her dominance in a way that went against military tradition? His training told him to follow orders from superior officers. But this order came from someone whose authority he wasn't entirely sure he respected. The internal conflict was visible in the slight trembling of his hands, the way his jaw clenched and unclenched, the barely noticeable shift in his stance. Queen Camilla waited. She had made her command, and now she would see what kind of man stood before her. This moment would reveal not just his character, but also give her insight into how the rest of the palace staff truly viewed her authority. If he obeyed immediately, it would show that her position was accepted. If he hesitated or refused, she would know she had significant work to do in establishing her legitimacy. The seconds stretched on. The guard's breathing became more labored as he wrestled with his decision. He thought about his oath of service, about the traditions he had sworn to uphold, about the respect he had for the institution of the monarchy. But he also thought about the woman standing before him, about the complicated path she had taken to reach this position, about the doubts that had been whispered throughout the palace since the succession. Other guards stationed at various points throughout the hall were watching now, their own positions requiring them to remain at attention, but their attention fully focused on their colleague's dilemma. They knew that whatever happened next would affect them all. The precedent being set in this moment would ripple through the entire royal household. Queen Camilla's expression remained calm and composed, but inside she was calculating. She had deliberately chosen this public setting, this specific guard, this particular moment because she understood the psychology of leadership. Sometimes authority had to be tested and proven rather than simply assumed. Sometimes a leader had to be willing to risk everything on a single moment of truth. The guard finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper, but clear enough for everyone nearby to hear. "Your Majesty," he said, his words carefully chosen, "I am not sure I understand the request." It was a diplomatic response, neither outright refusal nor immediate compliance. He was buying time, perhaps hoping for clarification that would help him navigate this unprecedented situation. But Queen Camilla was not interested in giving him an easy way out. "I believe my words were quite clear," she replied, her tone remaining level but taking on a harder edge. "I am asking you to kneel before your queen." The emphasis she placed on the word queen was unmistakable. This was not a request being made by Camilla the woman, or even Camilla the royal consort. This was a direct command from the sovereign, backed by all the authority and tradition of the British monarchy. She was forcing him to confront the reality of her position and his own obligations. The guard's internal struggle intensified. He could feel the eyes of his fellow guards upon him, could sense the staff members throughout the hall waiting to see what he would do. His decision in this moment would define not just his own future, but potentially influence how the entire royal household viewed their new monarch. He thought about his family, who had been so proud when he was selected for the Queen's Guard. He thought about his military career, which could be severely damaged by making the wrong choice here. But most of all, he thought about what his refusal would mean not just to Queen Camilla, but to the institution he had sworn to serve. The young man's hands began to tremble slightly as he gripped his rifle. The weight of the moment was crushing down on him, and he knew that whatever choice he made would echo through the palace corridors for years to come. Queen Camilla continued to wait, her patience both impressive and intimidating, giving him the space to make his decision, while making it clear that she would accept nothing less than his complete submission to her authority. A decision that changed everything. The young guard's response came not in words, but in action. Slowly, deliberately, he began to move. But instead of dropping to one knee as commanded, he did something that shocked everyone in the hall, even more than Queen Camilla's original order. He stepped forward, closer to the queen, and looked directly into her eyes. In that moment, all pretense of military protocol disappeared. This was no longer about following orders or maintaining ceremonial distance. This had become a deeply personal confrontation between two human beings with very different perspectives on duty, respect, and authority. "Your Majesty," he said, his voice now stronger and more confident than before. "I have served this institution for 3 years. I have stood guard through rain, snow, and blazing summer heat. I have protected this palace and everyone in it with my life, just as my father did before me, and his father before him." The hall was so quiet that every word carried clearly to every corner. Staff members had stopped even pretending to go about their duties and were openly watching this unprecedented exchange. Some looked nervous, others fascinated, all of them understanding that they were witnessing a moment that would be talked about for generations. Queen. Expression remained carefully controlled, but inside she was surprised by this development. She had expected either immediate compliance or stubborn resistance. She had not anticipated that the guard would turn this into a conversation about family, legacy, and personal honor. The guard continued, his voice gaining strength with each word. "My grandfather served King George VI during the war. He told me stories about standing watch while bombs fell on London, about protecting the royal family when everyone thought the Germans might invade. He taught me that being a queen's guard was not just about following orders, but about understanding what we truly serve." Other guards throughout the hall were listening intently now. This young man was speaking for all of them, expressing thoughts and feelings that many of them had harbored but never dared to voice. The tension in the room was electric, with everyone understanding that this conversation would define the relationship between Queen Camilla and her protective detail for years to come. "When I took my oath," the guard said, taking another step closer to the queen, "I swore to protect the crown, to serve the monarchy, and to uphold the traditions that have kept this institution strong for over 1,000 years. But I also swore to serve with honor, and that means being honest about what I see and what I believe." Queen Camilla felt a chill run down her spine. This was not going according to any script she had imagined. The guard was not simply defying her authority, he was challenging the very foundation of her legitimacy in a way that was both respectful and devastating.
"Oh.
You want me to kneel?" he continued, his blue eyes never leaving hers, "and I understand why. You need to know that your authority is accepted, that the people sworn to protect you will follow your commands without question. But kneeling is not what will earn you that respect, Your Majesty." The words hung in the air like smoke from a cannon blast. Everyone in the hall understood that the guard had just crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. He was no longer simply a soldier following or refusing orders. He had appointed himself as judge of the queen's worthiness to command. Queen Camilla's mind raced. She could have him arrested immediately for insubordination. She could have him removed from the guard and court-martialed. She could assert her authority through force and make an example of him that would ensure no other member of her household ever dared to question her again. But something in his manner, something in the conviction of his voice, made her pause. "In what," she asked quietly, "do you believe would earn that respect?" The question surprised everyone, including the guard himself. By asking rather than simply punishing his impertinence, Queen Camilla had transformed the confrontation into something entirely different. She had acknowledged that his opinion mattered, that his perspective had value, that perhaps there was something she could learn from this moment. The guard took a deep breath, understanding that his next words would either save his career or destroy it completely. The entire palace seemed to hold its breath. waiting to hear what a young soldier would dare to tell the Usuchi Queen of England about how she should conduct herself. Around the hall, other staff members exchanged glances. Some looked horrified at the guard's boldness. Others seemed impressed by his courage. All of them understood that they were witnessing a conversation that would either strengthen Queen Camilla's reign or create a crack in her authority that might never fully heal. The guard straightened his shoulders, lifted his chin, and prepared to give his queen an answer that would astonish everyone who heard it. The guard's surprising response, the young guard looked directly at Queen Camilla and spoke words that would echo through the palace for years to come. "Your Majesty, you will earn our respect the same way Queen Elizabeth did. It's the same way every great monarch in history has done. Not by demanding that we kneel, but by showing us why we should want to." The silence that followed was deafening. Every person in the hall felt the weight of what had just been said. This was not just a challenge to royal protocol. It was a fundamental statement about the nature of leadership itself. But then something unexpected happened. Instead of anger, instead of outrage at this unprecedented breach of royal etiquette, Queen Camilla began to smile. It was not a forced smile or a diplomatic one, but a genuine expression of surprise and, remarkably, appreciation. "Tell me more," she said quietly. And everyone in the hall leaned forward slightly, straining to hear every word. The guard seemed as surprised by her reaction as everyone else. But he had come too far to turn back now. "Your Majesty," he said, his voice becoming more confident, "my grandfather told me that Queen Elizabeth never once ordered him to kneel. She never demanded respect through commands or threats. Instead, she earned it every single day by the way she carried herself, by the sacrifices she made, by putting the country before her own comfort and convenience." Queen Camilla nodded slowly, encouraging him to continue. Around the hall, other staff members were beginning to understand that they were witnessing something remarkable, a conversation between monarch and subject that was more honest and direct than perhaps any in the palace's history told me about. "The war years," the guard continued, "when she and Princess Margaret were young, and the royal family could have fled to Canada for safety. Instead, they stayed in London while the bombs fell. Queen Elizabeth worked as a mechanic, getting her hands dirty, showing that she was willing to do the same work as any other British citizen. That's when people learned to truly respect her." The guard paused, gathering his courage for what he knew would be the most dangerous part of his speech. "Your Majesty, people are watching you now, just as they watched her then. They're wondering if you'll be a queen who demands respect or one who earns it. They're wondering if you understand that wearing the crown is about serving them, not about them serving you." Queen Camilla felt something shift inside her chest. This young man, barely old enough to have served for more than a few years, was teaching her something about leadership that all her years of royal training had not fully conveyed. He was showing her that true authority came not from the position itself, but from how one chose to exercise that position. "You're telling me," she said slowly, "that I should not command you to kneel, but that I should make you want to kneel."
Yes.
"Your Majesty," the guard replied without hesitation, "because when someone chooses to kneel, they do it because they genuinely respect and admire the person they're kneeling to. That means something. When they do it because they have to, it means nothing at all." The wisdom of his words hit everyone present like a physical force. Here was a simple truth about human nature, about leadership, about respect, being spoken by a young soldier to the Queen of England in language so clear and direct that no one could misunderstand it. Queen Camilla took a step back, and for a moment, her royal composure cracked slightly. Not with anger or embarrassment, but with something that looked remarkably like gratitude. "And what would it take," she asked, "for you to choose to kneel?" The guard considered this question carefully. Everyone in the hall understood that his answer would determine not just his own fate, but potentially influence how Queen Camilla approached her entire reign. "Your Majesty," he said finally, "show us that you love this country the way Queen Elizabeth did. Show us that you'll put the British people before your own comfort, that you understand the responsibility that comes with the crown. Show us that you're not just wearing it, but that you're worthy of it." The challenge was clear, direct, and impossibly brave. A young guard had just told the Queen of England exactly what she needed to do to earn his respect, and by extension, the respect of everyone who served under her. But instead of being offended, Queen Camilla found herself inspired. This young man had given her a roadmap, a clear path forward, and most importantly, he had shown her that the people around her were not just servants waiting for orders, but thinking individuals with their own standards and expectations. What happened next would determine whether this confrontation would be remembered as the beginning of Queen Camilla's successful reign, or as the moment when she lost the respect of her own household forever. The Queen's unexpected decision, Queen Camilla stood in silence for what felt like an eternity. Processing everything the young guard had said, the entire hall waited, tension thick in the air, as everyone wondered how the monarch would respond to such unprecedented honesty from a member of her household staff. Then, to everyone's complete astonishment, Queen Camilla did something that no one had expected. She removed her small crown, the one she wore for informal palace duties, and held it in her hands as she looked at it thoughtfully. "This crown," she said, speaking clearly enough for everyone in the hall to hear, "has been worn by queens who led their nations through war, through economic crisis, through social revolution. It has been worn by women who sacrificed everything for their people, who understood that being queen meant being the servant of all British citizens." She looked up from the crown and directly at the young guard. "You're right," she said simply. "I cannot demand your respect. I must earn it." The admission sent shockwaves through everyone present. Royal protocol had been completely abandoned. This was no longer a formal interaction between monarch and subject, but a genuine conversation between human beings about leadership, duty, and the true meaning of service. "Tell me your name," Queen Camilla said to the guard. "Private James Morrison, Your Majesty," he replied, his military training making him respond automatically even though everything else about the situation had moved far beyond normal protocol. "Private Morrison," she said, "I want you to know that what you've done here today, the courage you've shown in speaking honestly to me, tells me everything I need to know about the quality of the people who serve in this palace. Your grandfather would be proud." The young guard's composure finally cracked slightly, and emotion flickered across his face. He had expected punishment, dismissal, perhaps even arrest. He had not expected understanding, much less praise. Queen Camilla continued, "I have a proposal for you, and for everyone else who serves here. I will not ask anyone to kneel to me today. Instead, I will spend every day of my reign working to become the kind of queen that people choose to respect. And when that day comes, if it comes, any gesture of respect you offer will mean something real." She placed the crown back on her head, but somehow it looked different now. The authority it represented seemed less about demanding obedience and more about accepting responsibility. "Private Morrison," she said, "I want you to be completely honest with me about one more thing. What do you and the other guards really think about my becoming queen? Not what you're supposed to say, but what you actually think." The question hung in the air like a challenge. Everyone knew that his answer could determine the future relationship between Queen Camilla and her entire household staff. James Morrison took a deep breath, understanding that this was perhaps the most important question he had ever been asked. "Your Majesty," he said carefully, "many of us have had doubts. Not about your right to be queen, that's not for us to judge, but about whether you truly understand what it means to serve the British people." The honesty was brutal. But Queen Camilla had asked for it, and he was determined to give it to her. "Some of us worried," he continued, "that you might see being queen as a privilege rather than a responsibility. We worried that you might not understand the sacrifices that come with wearing that crown. But today, right now, you've shown us something different." "What have I shown you?" she asked. "That you're willing to listen," he replied. "That you care more about doing the job right than about people treating you like you're already perfect at it. That's what Queen Elizabeth used to do. She never stopped trying to learn how to be better at serving her people." Queen Camilla felt something settle in her chest, a sense of clarity that she hadn't experienced since becoming queen. This conversation, difficult as it had been, had given her something invaluable, an understanding of what her household staff actually needed from her. "Private Morrison," she said, "I want you to do something for me. I want you to promise that you and your fellow guards will continue to be this honest with me. If you see me making mistakes, if you think I'm not living up to the responsibility I've accepted, I want you to tell me. Not because I'm ordering you to, but because that's how I'll become the queen this country deserves." The young guard looked amazed. "Your Majesty, are you asking us to criticize you when we think you're wrong?" "I'm asking you to help me," she replied. "Because the truth is, I'm going to need all the help I can get to do this job properly." And with that, everything in the palace began to change. The moment that defined a reign, what happened next, surprised everyone in the hall, even more than anything that had come before. Private James Morrison, the young guard who had challenged his queen so boldly, slowly and deliberately began to lower himself to one knee. But Queen Camilla raised her hand, stopping him mid-motion. "No," she said firmly. "Not yet. When you decide to kneel, I want it to be because you believe I've earned it, not because you feel you should after what just happened here."
Oh.
The guard straightened up, and for the first time since the confrontation began, he smiled. It was a small smile, barely visible, but it was genuine, and it transformed his entire face. In that moment, everyone in the hall understood that something fundamental had changed in the relationship between the monarch and her household. "Your Majesty," Private Morrison said, "may I say something else?" "Please do." "What you just did, stopping me from kneeling when you could have accepted it as your victory, that tells me more about who you are than any ceremony or protocol ever could. My grandfather always said that you can judge a person's character by how they handle power when no one is forcing them to be fair." Queen Camilla felt a warmth spread through her chest. She realized that this conversation, challenging as it had been, had given her something she hadn't expected, not just the respect of her staff, but a clearer understanding of what kind of queen she wanted to be. Word of what happened in the grate hall spread through the palace within hours. But unlike typical palace gossip, this story grew more positive with each telling. Staff members who heard about Queen Camilla's willingness to listen, her admission that she needed to earn respect rather than demand it, and her genuine desire to serve the British, people properly found themselves looking at their new monarch with fresh eyes. The guards, in particular, began to see Queen Camilla differently. Private Morrison shared the Queen's words with his colleagues during their breaks, and the message spread through their ranks like wildfire. Here was a queen who understood that leadership was about service, not privilege. Here was someone who was willing to be challenged, to learn, to grow in the role, rather than simply expecting everyone to accommodate her. Over the following weeks, Queen Camilla made good on her promise. She began spending time with different departments in the palace, asking questions, listening to concerns, and genuinely trying to understand how her actions affected the people who worked for her. She visited the kitchens and thanked the cooks personally. She spent time with the housekeeping staff and learned about their daily challenges. She met with the security team and asked them what they needed to do their jobs better. But most importantly, she continued to have regular conversations with Private Morrison and his fellow guards. She kept her promise to listen when they had concerns or suggestions, and she began to implement changes based on their feedback. The guards' quarters were improved. Their schedules were adjusted to be more reasonable. Their concerns about security protocols were taken seriously and addressed. 3 months after that, pivotal conversation in the Great Hall, something extraordinary happened. Queen Camilla was walking through the palace gardens when she encountered Private Morrison on duty at one of the side entrances. Without being asked, without any prompting or ceremony, he dropped to one knee as she approached. This time, she didn't stop him, "Your Majesty," he said, looking up at her with clear, respectful eyes. "You have earned this." Queen Camilla felt tears prick her eyes, but she kept her composure. "Thank you, Private Morrison," she said quietly. "That means more to me than you could possibly know." When he stood, she added, "But you should know that you and your colleagues have earned something too. You've earned a queen who will never forget that respect is something to be cherished, not demanded." The story of Queen Camilla and the guard who wouldn't kneel became legend throughout the palace. But it was told not as a tale of conflict, but as the moment when a queen learned the most important lesson of her reign. It spread beyond the palace walls, too. reaching the British public through carefully shared stories about how their new monarch was approaching her role with humility and genuine desire to serve. Years later, when historians wrote about Queen Camilla's reign, they would point to that morning in the Great Hall as the moment she truly became queen, not because of any ceremony or constitutional process, but because she chose to transform a challenge to her authority into an opportunity to become worthy of the crown she wore and Private James Morrison. He served with distinction for many more years, eventually rising through the ranks to become a senior officer in the Queen's Guard. But he never forgot the day when a young queen taught him that true leadership begins with listening. And when he taught her that respect is always a choice, never a requirement. The palace was never quite the same after that day, and everyone who worked there agreed that it was better for the change.